What's up, YouTube? It's your boy JP's on the keys, and it's too easy about the video today. I'm gonna finish the Suez Crisis by Epic History TV. Again, shout out to Epic History TV because they make amazing content. This dude makes amazing content, man. Like, I heard this one dude, he makes amazing content. Like, shout out to him. I can understand why the uploads are not frequent because this is a lot of work. Because not only do you gotta get the footage, you gotta edit, you gotta do when he was doing the Napoleon, he had to do all the the battle format thing. Like, that's a lot of work. So definitely shout out to him. Definitely go over there and shoot him a subscribe. We get him to 1 million, bro. Get him to 1 million because he needs that. You know what I'm saying? He's definitely putting in that work. But let's get to the Suez Crisis.
In July 1956. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company. Egyptians would take charge of this vital strategic waterway, connecting Europe to Asia, with immediate effect.
As they should, because it's through their country, right? And then it's like, oh, if other countries want to come through, we tax it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I would do if I was Egypt. Hey, if you want to use our canal, tax. I'm putting, you know what I'm saying? Tax. I'm charging you. That's exact. You have to. That's the best way. If you know it's an area of need, that's the only way. That's the fastest way to get to India. So you know what I mean? Hey, I'm taxing. You know what I'm saying? Hey, either you pay the tax or you go all the way around Africa, my guy. That's how I'm doing it. If I'm the leader.
Britain and France relied on the canal route for their vital supplies of Middle East oil, which fueled their economies. In their eyes, Nasser was a threat, a dictator intent on uniting the Arab world against them, destroying their influence in the Middle East and North Africa, and using control of the canal as a weapon against them.
Taking control of something that's in your country and other people have been using for their benefit.
Secretly, Britain and France agreed to force regime change on Egypt. A joint military intervention to depose Nasser and reassert their standing as global powers. It was not Britain or France that struck first against Nasser. It was Israel. On the 29th of October, Israeli paratroopers landed in the Egyptian Sinai, seizing the strategic Mitla Pass and paving the way for an invasion by ground forces. At the UN, Israel insisted it was acting in self-defense against raids by Palestinian fighters known as Fedayeen, operating from bases in Gaza and Sinai.
It is determined to wipe out the bases in the Sinai wilderness from which murder and death and destruction are launched again.
But there were...
So the Israelis have been fighting against the Palestinians. Oh, this has been... Okay. Now I know this is not a brand new issue. Okay, now I know. Okay, so they've always had their issue with the Palestinians, and this is the 1950s. Here it is, 64 years later, still issues.
No Fedayeen bases in Sinai.
Wait, what?
But there were no Fedayeen bases in Sinai. Britain and France, claiming to be acting on behalf of the international community, issued an ultimatum to both sides. Stop fighting within 12 hours and withdraw all forces 10 miles from the Suez Canal, or they would intervene to enforce compliance. Egypt was effectively being told to abandon the Sinai and the canal. Israel accepted the terms. Nasser refused. So on the 31st of October, British and French aircraft, taking off from carriers in the Mediterranean and bases in Cyprus and Malta, began bombing Egyptian airfields, air defences and infrastructure. But not all was as it seemed. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion had been considering an attack on Egypt for many months. He was encouraged by Moshe Dayan, the hawkish commander of Israel's armed forces. Nasser, like all leaders of Arab states, did not view the new Jewish state as legitimate. Now receiving modern weapons from Czechoslovakia, he was seen as a potential threat to Israel's survival. They were also determined to end Egypt's blockade of the Straits of Tiran, which prevented Israeli access to the Red Sea and limited opportunities for trade. France wanted to ally with the Israelis to get rid of Nasser, but British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden was anxious about being seen as the aggressor. So the French came up with an idea. At Sèvres, near Paris, representatives of Britain, France and Israel met in secret to plan a war. Israel would invade Egypt, allowing Britain and France, posing as peacemakers, to issue an ultimatum they knew only Israel would accept. Then, claiming to be acting to safeguard the canal, they would invade Egypt and overthrow Nasser, though they had no real plan for what to do once he was gone. It would take years for the full details of this conspiracy to emerge.
Okay, so Israel invades Egypt. Okay, so now you have conflict. So now you have just cause to come in and be like, hey, y'all gotta stop. Y'all gotta stop firing, stop doing war, and then you're gonna overthrow Nasser. And then what else? What are you gonna take back control of you're gonna take back control of the canal you was already using for years already? What's your plan after that? What are you gonna try to what are you gonna station troops in Egypt like you probably already are, like you were before? Like where are you going from there? Okay, you overthrow Nasser. Now you just have the canal. What else is what are we gonna do from that? And then we can make money in trade, but
on the 5th of November, after a week of bombing, and with Israeli troops winning the battle in Sinai, British and French paratroopers were dropped onto targets around Port Said and Port Fouad at the mouth of the Suez Canal. Once on the ground, they quickly seized Egyptian airfields and key infrastructure. The next morning, under cover of airstrikes and naval bombardment, British and French landings began.
So now we have people dying because people are sad that they can't exploit a canal for financial benefit. So now people have to die in a war. That makes perfect sense. I know somebody's like, well, the oil, we needed that because it needed to fund our economy. But you could have just had it. You could have just been like, oh, okay, we know that this canal is kind of in your country, so maybe we'll just pay the tax and just keep it pushing. That's really what it is. But now since the country that has it wants to take control of it and use it for their gain, they're trying to overthrow us. They're trying to destroy the influence of Britain in a country that's not Britain.
Fierce street fighting raged throughout the day, but the Egyptians were massively outgunned, and it proved a one-sided contest. Around 600 Egyptian soldiers and police were killed. British and French deaths totaled just 26. Egyptian civilians suffered most. Up to 1,000 lost their lives, with many more left homeless by air raids and shelling.
Again, civilians, innocent civilians died over a canal. You died over a canal. Let's continue though.
By the end of the day, the British and French were in control.
Where do you go from there?
But they couldn't prevent the Egyptians sabotaging the Suez Canal itself. They sank ships in its narrow channel, blocking the canal and putting it out of action for several months. It wasn't hard to see that the British, French and Israelis were working together. And at the United Nations, world opinion quickly turned against them.
Isn't it funny how like now, especially in Europe, I know that it's a big like anti-Muslim, anti-Arab culture in Europe, but now for their financial benefit, yeah, we'll partner with you for your financial benefit for a cause like this, but there's still like if you see, because I've seen it, it's a very huge anti-Arab, anti-Muslim culture in Europe, especially in like Britain, especially in Great Britain. Because I've seen the documentaries, I've seen the videos, but just the irony is crazy. Like the irony is ridiculous.
For once, the US and Soviet Union were united in condemnation. A typically animated Soviet premier, Nikita...
I'm sorry, I'm pausing. But the United States is against Israel? What? They don't seem to be doing anything now. Now we have video evidence of the Israelis attacking innocent Palestinians. I know you've seen it. Now are they sending troops to help the Palestinians? I'm gonna give you a quick answer. No. No. You know, the irony, just the roles flip. The irony though. The irony is ridiculous. So now you condemn an attack against, you condemn an Israeli attack, but you don't condemn Israeli persecution of Palestinians. Okay then.
Khrushchev even threatened to fire rockets at Paris and London. President Eisenhower thought the invasion had no moral or legal justification, and he was furious with his British ally for going behind his back.
The British and French governments delivered a 12-hour ultimatum to Israel and Egypt, now followed up by armed attacks against Egypt. The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance. As it is the manifest right of any of these nations to take such decisions and actions, it is likewise our right, if our judgment so dictates, for we do not accept the use of force as a wise or proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
Eisenhower wanted international attention focused on Hungary, where Soviet troops were, at that moment, brutally crushing a popular uprising. Instead, Britain and France's reckless intervention was likely to push Arab states closer to the Soviet Union. In the UN Security Council, Britain and France used their veto to block resolutions that criticized Israel's attack on Egypt, or their own intervention. But with both world superpowers condemning their attack, they now faced a vote in the General Assembly and the threat of UN sanctions. Britain's economy had been fragile before the crisis began. Now, market fears caused the British currency to crash, threatening economic disaster. Only a massive loan from the International Monetary Fund could save Britain, but Eisenhower blocked any IMF aid until Britain agreed to a UN-backed ceasefire in Egypt.
Salute to you, Eisenhower. Salute to you. Thank you for realizing that the unjustified invasion of countries for economic benefit is not right. Thank you for realizing that. I'm glad you realized that. Thank you for using your brain.
Eden, facing growing opposition abroad, at home and from within his own government, had few options. Just 2 days after British troops landed in Egypt, they announced a ceasefire. The French, abandoned by their ally, had no choice but to follow suit. Within days, the UN's first major peacekeeping operation got underway, as Danish UN troops arrived in Egypt to take over from the British and French. As they packed up and re-embarked on their landing ships to return home, it was officially job well done. But in truth, Suez had been a humiliating fiasco. The political leadership had been reckless, the military objectives confused, and as soon as international pressure had mounted up, the British had had no option but to abort the entire mission. That winter, under intense American pressure, Israeli forces also withdrew from Sinai.
Yeah, an act of disaster. It wasn't disastrous when you did it. It wasn't disastrous when you secretly met with France and Israel on how to take down Egypt. It wasn't disastrous then. You're only mad because you got caught.
The Suez Crisis forced Britain and France to accept that they were now second-rank powers. No longer could they act as they wished on the world stage, without first considering the view of the United States. The lesson taken by the British was never again to jeopardize their so-called special relationship with America. For France, the lesson was that Britain and America were unreliable allies, and their interests were better served by closer ties within Europe. Israel achieved some objectives, including the opening of the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. But with Nasser still in power, future conflict with Egypt and its other Arab neighbours was almost certain. The Sinai War proved to be a precursor to the far more decisive Six-Day War, fought a decade later. British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden's career and health were ruined. He resigned, but not before lying to Parliament about his knowledge of the secret deal with Israel.
My dear of office, I wish my successor all good fortune. And Godspeed to you all. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
President Nasser, fated as the hero of the Arab world for having stood up to European imperialists, had in reality been saved by US and UN intervention. But his modernizing reforms, championing of the Arab cause, and opposition to foreign intervention mean his memory is still revered by Arabs across the Middle East. The impact of the Suez Crisis on America was perhaps the most far-reaching. The collapse of British and French prestige amongst Arab nations meant the US would now take the lead in countering Soviet expansion in the Middle East and securing the West's oil supplies. The Suez Crisis would accelerate US involvement in this volatile region. The consequences would stretch well into the 21st century.
Clarifying debate over a possible war in Iraq has given an added sense of urgency to their mission.
But yeah, man, I'm telling you, you gotta, and for all the especially in the U.S. too, all the anti-Muslim, anti-Arab rhetoric that is thrown around a lot in the U.S., they sure do not mind when other Middle Eastern countries do it to themselves, though, because I don't see the U.S. I don't see Mr. Trump talking about the Palestinians being persecuted by the Israelis, innocent Palestinians being beaten, being killed, being tortured by the Palestinians. I don't see Trump talking about it. I don't see any of the Democratic leaders talking about it. Everybody's worried about the pandemic. Everybody's worried about. Oh, wait. This is them. Wear your mask. Remember, we have to eradicate the pandemic. And when get out my face with that. Get out of here with that. We got real war issues and we worry about that. Because we can't say it because then the boom goes the ads. But still. Come on now. We gotta do better, bro. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Don't forget to turn on my post notifications if you haven't already. Check out my gaming channel. I just posted 2 new videos on there yesterday. Definitely gonna start putting out more content on there. Anyways, I'm out. Be safe. Have a great day. Stay on the grind. Peace.